All right. Well, it's good to be here, man. Chatting a little bit about the industry, the business, the good, the bad, the ugly of all the things we do.
Absolutely, man. I mean, I think that today's honestly been a pretty solid day. We had a national call. We had some great chats with some agents,
Yeah.
both struggling and also doing great. But it's just been like, it's one of those days where I don't feel like there's any real emergencies or issues anymore. It's just, you just handle stuff that are coming your way. That's it.
That is true. I think that's the one of the main factors in maturing as a leader is the ability to filter out instances that really require you to be in panic mode and the ones that really don't. And you
Yep.
kind of realize as you go along, like 99% of things you don't need to be in panic mode for.
Yeah, one thing I learned very early on is like, hey, it'd be fantastic if everything came to us single file line as every single issue, and
Yep.
said like, hey, here's your ticket, explain to us our problem. And the truth is, none it never happens that way.
No.
You get 10,000 issues all at once, or two issues all at once, and you have to then decipher which one's going to be the one that you have to put the most time and energy into, or the other one that's going to be like, hey, can this really be worked through? Have we done everything necessary? And did we also just kind of keep that same idea of like API, always positive intent? Like, did X person or X thing really mean to do someone wrong? And the truth is, 99% of the time, no, it's never the case.
Yeah, that's true. And so, I mean, and that's a good segue into maybe some of the things we wanted to talk about around like, leadership, because I think one of the key elements of leadership is consistent emotional stability. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that people develop, as they become business owners, as they become self-employed, number one, and then also as they develop, other people that they partner with and mentor and train and coach is like, you talk to certain people and they have this mindset of like, okay, every single thing is coming at me as if like I'm an employee and, I have to filter out, is this coming from the big boss and it's important, or is it coming from someone who's less senior and it doesn't matter? And like, they just really struggle to filter through different tasks, and they don't understand like when you are entrepreneur, when you're self-employed, you have to have the ability to filter through an effective lens of like,
Yeah.
what's the most important. And one tool that we used was the productivity pyramid, one of the really cool coaching tools. And they talked about like what has high lifetime value. If I'm talking about time management, what are things that I know from a longevity perspective are going to be really effective for me to spend my time on? And those could be things like, their general health aspects, of course. They could be meditation, reading, but it then can also be, things that are associated with diet and health. And then you talk about like what are high dollar per hour activities. So am I spending my time being effective with the sales process, with finding clients and meeting with clients, the things that really ring the cash register?
Yep.
And then they talk about low dollar per hour, like stuff that you can hire out as an admin or a recruiter or someone that you can really kind of lean on to build your business, that is the $10, $15, $20 an hour stuff that you don't necessarily have to spend your time on and almost cost you too much money to spend your time there. And then lastly, they have kind of the negative dollar per hour or $0 per hour activities, which I think the biggest thing there is worrying. We
Yep.
come back to that a little bit. So like maybe touch on that. What has been your progression as a leader in how you handled problems?
Yeah, and I'm gonna touch on the last thing you mentioned there, which was the part about worrying, because I think there's a lot of people that think they don't ever know enough, and that know enough locks them up, right? But then I think there's a next level to it, that once they figure out that they understand that maybe they're not quite consciously competent in the level that they want to be, but then they realize this part, they start getting anxiety, and then the anxiety sets in, and then they don't work. And there's probably a scientific technical term around all of this, but basically it just looks like this. Now they're not working. Now they know they're not working. And now the anxiety kicks in even more, and
Yeah.
it stresses out them even more. And it becomes this like almost like I said, self-destructive way about going about things, that all of a sudden it's like, then they're really upset with themselves for not working to that level, even though they know they should have been dialing or reaching out to clients or recruiting and prospecting in multiple different ways. And so as like a manager and as a coach to a lot of agents in the company about insurance, and honestly a lot of times just being productive, I've found that you've got to just stop putting things off. Like, procrastination does not serve you at the level that you even think that it may. like, oh, okay, I'll save this to do it later. All it does is then puts that little bit of thing in the back of your head, taking up that mental real estate that says, oh crap, I haven't done that yet, or I still need to do it. There's a great book out there, Eat That Frog, right? That talks about just get out in front of it, go do it, hammer it out, take out the biggest tax first, because then it eliminates the necessary feel of like, I still have to do that. And you can get to all the other things to make it feel like it's not impeding you.
Yeah. And that element of that vicious cycle of like, I'm stressed about something, and because it's stressful, it feels good to maybe put it off. But then the fact that it's in the back of your mind, you're thinking about it, like makes it even more of a problem. So I just think one of those elements with Eat That Frog is like just the do it now, get it done now so it can't multiply. If you have something you have to do, you can only worry about it once. If you do it then, the more you push it off, the more you're going to consistently worry about it. And I think the other element of that is there's a fear of failure. Like maybe the other element, and we're reading actually a really good book as a team right now called Who Not How. And it's really about associating tasks with people that are maybe more qualified than we are to do them. Because there's an element of procrastination where like we're just being lazy and we need to get to it. But there's another element of like we might not be the most qualified to actually do that particular thing. And that might actually be a trigger. And I think about this for my business as I look at things like we were just talking about taxes the other day, right? Like we've been worried about the taxes in our business, and you and I don't do taxes. We've hired that out, but just the thought of having to come up with these numbers creates this like a little bit of stress because it's so unnatural and not really in our wheelhouse. And so we've found, experts that can make sure they do it right. And so we also don't get audited because we don't want that.
There was a really funny video I just saw the other day. Maybe I'll send it to you. And it was this kid. He's sitting on the couch and he's just looking defeated. And he's playing Monopoly. And so his mom is recording him. And the kid is just looking like he's about to just start crying. She's like, what happened? And he goes, taxes. Taxes happen. And she's like, what don't you like about taxes? It's the worst part of this game. And mom goes, it is the game, son.
It's the game. It's the game.
It's such a good video.
That's
I was
funny.
like, man. But going into the piece about like kind of being the best and like, for instance, not taking on things that you're not great at. I think that is one of the biggest killers to people being self-employed, taking on entrepreneurship, and quote unquote trying to be this jack of all trades or putting the cap on for everything. I think that there's a level that you need to understand everything. Then there's a level of you need to understand that you don't do everything. And if you're really bad at stuff, stop trying to do it. Hire it out. Stop being cheap. Hit people on payroll. Find other 1099 contractors who are really good at this stuff to alleviate that pressure from you so that you can focus on what you're good at. A great quote that goes into more than just, even skills, but let's talk about like emotional responses and things like that. Good friend Meredith Ellison said this, is like sometimes it's a lot more about knowing who you aren't so you can actually step into who you are and focus more into that. Because when you know what you're not good at or how you handle or how you respond to things, you can then take that and alleviate that from yourself. Like, look, I'm probably just not the person to handle this.
Yeah.
And then you can really focus on what you're really good at and see how you can add value there.
Yeah. And I think that's a tough maybe distinction that people could struggle with, like understanding basically everything. And then within that, knowing what you're not good at, because you don't know what you don't know. But like, even as you're hiring things out, you have to have at least an elementary understanding of it so that you can effectively work with and manage and set the proper expectations for people you bring on.
And not get screwed over.
Yeah, for sure. Exactly, 100%. Like, I know nothing about accounting, but I know enough to be able to tell if an accountant is doing a good or bad job.
Correct.
So I think that's the element, is like as you're developing leadership and you're growing as a leader, like you got to be able to know how to do each one of the tasks that you're asking them to do. And that's where this big term lead from the front always comes from, that we hear so much in our industry. It's like you got to lead from the front, which means that you're doing the activity that you're asking of other people to do, not only so that it provides credibility because they see you doing it, but also so like you can be the coach and mentor for them. And so I want to ask you about that actually while we're on it, if we can go there, is like, you've built a very sizable agency and team, and part of doing that is you have to have kind of leadership within leadership. You have kind of pockets of teams. And so how have you found that your mentorship or coaching or training, whatever term you want to use, has kind of evolved as you've scaled up from 5 agents to 10 to 20 to 30 to 50?
One of the things is system and process. I think that mentoring and developing 5 people is so much easier than 50. And I want to say that in the grand scheme of this is when I have those 5 people, guess who all those 5 people directly report to? Andrew. And it's so easy to understand everything that's going on. But when you get 50 people, how many of those 50 people actually report to Andrew? 5 to 10. Well, how many of those? Now 40 report to those maybe 5 to 10. The truth is, it keeps cascading down. Yeah. And so one of the things I really learned recently, more than ever, is the importance of actually equipping people to do the necessary things or have the necessary skills or develop or understand. Like the more that I can focus on equipping individuals or, leaders, the easier it is to actually run and develop an agency. And so like there's a great audio out there, John Maxwell. I think I have his leadership podcast called 4 Ways to Equipping People. That is an excellent audio about why the importance is, what it can do for you, how you develop it so that it's not solely reliant on you entirely, but at the same token, you can still have the freedom to develop and build a massive agency. So equipping people is the biggest single-handed note and tool I could give somebody.
Yeah. So what's the first step there? So you're working with someone who's developing a team. Maybe they already have a few people on their team, and maybe you've been responsible for more of their people, but now you're trying to shift that responsibility over so that you have kind of those 4 or 5 people reporting sort of to them, and then you're maybe just mentoring. It's really just about leading leaders, at that point.
Right.
So how do you kind of work with people in that transition?
Yeah, and taking the whole, there's something out there called the apprenticeship square, right? And the apprenticeship square will go, people are, you got to understand they're unconsciously incompetent. They don't even know what they don't know. Then they're consciously incompetent. They understand they're bad. Then they get consciously competent. There's a bridge there that has to happen. And then they eventually get to this last part where they're unconsciously competent. They just know how to operate. But there's a level in each of these stages that we take even brand new people through and learning how to produce, that we also then have to go back to the very beginning of a leader and say that, okay, when somebody is unconsciously incompetent, we need to spend 90% of the time telling them exactly what they should be doing, how to coach this person, what they need to say, what it needs to look like, how they need to report, what the 10x accountability looks like after that. Then the next part, when they kind of understand that they're not great at maybe coaching or developing others on their team, that's when we move into more of like a coaching versus telling them what they need to say. Now we're kind of advising them around like, look, you did this well. This is where you can improve. This is what you forgot. Let me show you how you should say that this go around. Like, and really helping them understand like, okay, now I'm in a coaching manner, but I'm still giving them about 70% direction versus 90. Once you get to then, they bridge this gap. They kind of have this better understanding. They understand what they need to do, how they need to do it, what needs to be said, when it needs to be said, things like that. Then you can move into more of this collaborative feel to where it's a lot less me trying to tell Grant what he needs to do or how to do it. And maybe now he's coming to me a lot more with questions about like, how would you better handle this? Or if I did this and this agent said that, how could I do that? Or what if I wanted to, develop more people, just like we're doing now, this collaborative conversation can start happening. Once we move past this idea of consciously competent, the next phase that happens is basically delegation. I don't have to really second guess whatever Grant's doing anymore because I know he's got it handled. He has a level of competence. He has a level of understanding. He may come to questions here and there, but for the most part, calm, cool, collected, he's going to handle what he's got to handle. So in my head, that's what I'm thinking about all the time because it relates just as much to a brand new producer as it does to a leader. But we just have to understand where both spectrums, where are they at? In both instances, they are equipping.
Yeah. So that equip, that's a significant term, I think, that a lot of people in leadership really get confused about how to start with, because you don't want to micromanage people's businesses.
Yep.
And you want to give them the flexibility to fail, because that's where learning happens, even though it sucks. But you also, when you're on the top of the mountain looking down, you can kind of see where they're, heading towards a cliff potentially. And you want to be there to catch them before they jump off the cliff, but you also want to let them run towards it and hopefully recognize it's there.
Yep. And sometimes it's one of the hardest things to watch. People just, because I relate it to us. We could talk about cliffs. We could also talk about the fire, right?
Yeah.
Like the fire is struggle. Everyone wants to go around it, under it, over it, completely avoid it. But the truth is, the only way you can go do it is go through it.
Yep.
And through the fire struggle, you end up figuring things out. But watching people go through it, and you're like, I don't know. Sometimes you wonder, Grant, I don't know how long this tunnel is going to be for them. Fire of struggle. Sometimes you're just like, oh, I got to let them figure it out.
And it's so tough because you see some people that get it so quick.
Yeah.
And you're just like, man, how do I find 50 of you? And then you have those people that are really focused and they're intentional, but they're struggling a little bit. And those are the hardest people to watch because you want them to win so bad. But it's like you can't do everything for them. There's an extent that you can do for them, but it kind of runs into a limit. And so you just find that point where it's like, listen, I've really done all that I can to really help you get there. I'm never going to stop being there for you, but it's really on you at this point to make it the rest of the way.
Yep. And I think that failure piece too is I think that's also a part of leadership and coaching is I've got to actually see how they handle failure.
That's fair.
That's fair. If they get absolutely just tarnished and destroyed and distraught and the world is ending, man, can you imagine when they got 5,000 problems in front of them? Once again, going back to the very first part of this conversation, you're going to have, the bigger you get more problems. They don't come at you single file. When you have 2 people, you got a few problems. When you have 50 people, you got a lot more problems. You got to figure out how to decipher what's actually necessary and earns your time of how you handle it. And if you cripple in front of failure, it's tough to lead other people.
Yeah. Well, and so you're basically paid based on the quality of a problem that you're capable of solving. And so the more you get paid, the bigger problems you're, in theory, able to take care of. So let's talk about your journey here as you've kind of scaled from going from, somebody brand new part-time. I know even before this business, talking about stocking boxes in a warehouse for $12 an hour and, making $1,000, $1,500 a month. But as you've gone to, 5,000 a month, 10,000 a month, 15, 20, up to 40,000 plus a month of income, how have your ability to identify and resolve problems changed? Has it been that it doesn't necessarily get easier, it's just that the challenges are different? Or is it more like you're just so much more equipped to handle them?
Yeah, I would say that it's definitely the latter. I was talking to one of my good mentors in this business, Jacob Pogue, and he was just saying, Andrew, I've never been more clear on what it actually takes to win at this business than ever before. And he says it's not that there's just some magical fairy dust. It's not that there's, hey, you just figured it out. Now all cylinders are clicking. He said there's just a core set of principles that if you operate behind them, they're all leadership principles, right? Treating people well, celebrating them, understanding that you need to focus on the devils in the details around things. If you can focus on celebrating people and making them feel good every day, you're going to get more productivity out of them. Learn to challenge people effectively that doesn't tear them down. All these small things that seem so minuscule. That's what Jacob said. He's the better you can operate behind these principles, the better off you're going to do. But people want it to be this grand scheme of, oh my gosh, I figured it out. And the truth is, no, you've literally just read more, developed yourself more, led more than everyone else. Let me tell you a quick story on unrelated to our business, but I mean, it could be in our business too, is I was at Easter weekend, and my cousin was there, and she was telling me about, she's working for a health insurance company, and she's doing customer service and stuff, but she'd tell me some horror stories of managers. I mean, horror stories of this manager just blatant disregard, commentary that just should avoid the workplace, about sex, ethnicity, nationality, like stuff like that. It's like, why are we even discriminating at that level? But it just goes to show. I was like, well, out of curiosity, right? I want to know. I was asking her, what ranking is this person out of all of the managers that are there? There's 5 managers. In 8 years, for the past 8 years now, this manager has been number 3 and never came close to hitting number 2 or 1. And I'm like, it's interesting to see undeveloped individuals lead a team of people and how they can do okay, probably through fear versus actual appreciation and development. But the minute you find somebody who can love on somebody, appreciate them, develop them, show them that they're valued, show them that they care about their success, show them I'm for you, that's how you take a successful team from maybe a number 3 spot to a number 1 spot.
And that element right there, I think, is where culture, a positive culture, is defined.
Yep.
Is that I want something for you instead of something from you. And that's where so many of the leaders that we've come across have shined through. It's you never have to question if Andrew is in it for him or in it for me. Like, I already know that that's the case, that you're looking to root on others. And that's what we try and do, is like put people in a position where they can shine on their own. And, that's where leaders, whether for better or for worse, like, we get all the blame and none of the credit. And like, you just look at some things that happen and you're like, man, good for you. I'm celebrating this win.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to take any credit because that's not what we do. But it's also that challenging piece of, we can feel good that we were part of that journey and that we helped them get there.
So let me, it's funny, right? We always take all the blame and none of the credit. So let me take this a next step further, this higher level perspective of leadership, right? Taking that same idea, all the blame, none of the credit. Imagine what that does for your people when they see you that you did that for them. You end up developing this level of relationship that they say, man, I would lay on the tracks for this guy because he just took a bullet for me. The other side of it is, as a leader, we've got to understand I should never want to put my people in front of a firing squad. It doesn't matter what the situation is, right? To take an idea, let's say somebody did something and now we've got to get on a call, right? Because some people were offended. I can either have the individual who said those words make the apology to the whole team on a call or whatever it is, or I can just take it and let them know that, hey, apology, that was not meant to be said. Here's what we've done. Here's how it meant to come across. And we've already taken the necessary steps and actions to become better and be better. Yeah. The emotional damaging piece to somebody that could go out there and get in front of that call and have to apologize in front of a bunch of people where maybe half of them didn't even feel like that was the big issue. All of a sudden, now you may have hurt that individual more than the people who were offended. Because now they're they're thinking they're going to step on eggshells on every little thing that they say.
Yeah.
And now I'm also depriving this person their ability to maybe realize their full potential or even just become better because now they're fearful of getting blasted again. So as a leader, it's our job to jump in front of that firing squad or fall on the sword or, take the blame and just know that hey, we've got your back, buddy. Don't worry about it. You just need to do better and be better and be fast and firm with that.
And it's those coachable moments where you're identifying the opportunities where they are putting themselves in a spot where we need to step in and help them, but outside of stepping in and help them, and we never undermine leaders, especially in front of other people. I think that's a big red flag. Is if I was working with a newer, maybe mentor, and he was trying to help his team with preparing for a client, and he gave them just totally
garbage advice,
just total airball, whoopsies. I got this guy, he's got cancer. Yeah, go ahead and just take him with a standard term policy. So we might have to jump in, and it's just all about how you phrase it. So if you were the person I was chatting with, and you had were talking to your mentor, and they maybe missed the boat on the advice, I'd say, hey, you know what? I think he's definitely got something there that maybe we should look into. We should probably look into the agent guide there. what might be a slightly better option just based on, his age or health condition would just be to go here. So like we always want to frame it in the sense that it never undermines that leader. It never makes them feel stupid. We never want to discourage someone from taking risks, because one of the things that we love to see is people that do go out there and they kind of screw things up a little bit, but what they're trying to do is grow themselves. And so we celebrate that growth. One of the things I actually thought about when you were talking about just kind of, don't save people from the firing squad is that book Unstoppable by Tim Grover. And he talks about how he's never going to put people in a position that they're not ready for. He's never going to take someone who he knows is unprepared and try and make them face a challenge that they're not capable of facing. But at the same time, he's going to make sure that the second they're ready, he's going to get them in front of it. And for example, like you think of people that are at corporations and they've been probably deserving of a promotion for many, many months, probably even many, many years. But for whatever reason, they don't get it. And, that's something we never want to do. Like, we never want to take something away from someone that they're deserving of, but we want to protect them to the extent that we're not going to put them in front of that firing squad too soon.
Yeah. And so, like, that's a great question here. So, like, so the next thing goes is, like, well, how do you know when somebody's ready, right? Well, I'll let you go, but, like, my first thought is just truly ask them questions. Like, for instance, if I know the situation and I'm gauging if this person's ready, all I need to do is ask them a few simple questions about how they would react or what they would respond to or in what they would do in X situation. And I can immediately tell if they're ready for something. And it's very simple. It's not a big thing. Anything you do differently?
I think where everything is made, whether sales are made, where mentorship is made, where leadership is made, is in the quality of questions that you ask and the ability to confidently ask them. So you're spot on there. I think that if you have someone who you're about to put them on a position, like let's say, for example, they've never hosted a conference call before, and they're about to go in front of 600 people on a Zoom call, and they've never done that before. You would not want to start with just saying, hey, listen, man, here's the login for the call. It's at 10 a.m. and I'm excited to hear what you have to say.
We're gonna have it's gonna be a blast.
we're gonna have a ton of fun. You'll be fine. Don't worry about it. So we'd never do that, but we would just ask a few questions. Hey, let me ask you. Is this something that you feel comfortable preparing some material for, or would you like a little bit of help creating an outline? So we start with kind of poking a little bit with those questions of like, hey, where do you feel that you're prepared? Where do you feel that you're unprepared? And you can tell pretty quickly, like, okay, this person needs a lot. I'm going to need to step in here. Yep. You know what? Why don't we do a few run-throughs? Let's do a role play. Let's get together an hour before.
Yep.
Like, what level
Prepare
you need
them.
to do. Yeah, exactly. So
Equip
I agree with
them.
that. That's it. It all comes back to equip. So I think asking questions. And another thing is just really not assuming anything. That's a really dangerous thing is, whenever I've assumed that people were good and I got off the phone with them, and then I come back to them later, and they're like, yeah, didn't go so well. I was like, well, man, I really dropped the ball as a leader because I didn't walk them through a challenge that they were not necessarily capable of facing. It was more a situation where it was like, I need to do it, and they need to watch, instead of I need to give them advice and then have them, tell it. So here's a perfect example. Let's talk about and this is really, it's about a client, but really it's about leadership. So the very first family I ever met with in this business 7 years ago, I was meeting with them, and it was a situation where I was going in with a game plan to help her with a plan to pay off her entire mortgage if she died. But after going through her age and her health and everything, she wasn't going to qualify for that, at least not with any reasonable amount of, within her budget. And so at that point, I just didn't know what to do because I was there sitting face to face, as we used to do back in the old days, when we used to walk to school up hills both ways.
Oh my God.
And I asked for help. And was very fortunate that Miranda Martin, who's an incredible leader in our business, but was the one of the top producers at the time in 2016. She got on speaker, or first she called me and I explained the situation. She said, okay, here's exactly how you explain it. And I just was like, okay, I kind of get it, but I feel lost. Now, in that moment, her next thing could have been that she hung up and let me do it. But instead, she just asked me a simple question: do you got this, or do you need me?
Yeah.
And in that moment, I was like, I need you.
Yeah.
And she said, okay, put me on speaker. So I put her on speaker. She spent, the better part of 30, 45 minutes going through explaining everything. She was like, hey, grab the application, write this. I was like, hey, okay, this application, I think it's new. What's DL stand for? She's like, driver's license. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's right. Like I'm making every rookie mistake in the book, but it was okay because I had a qualified mentor on the line, and we were able to write those policies. And 7 years later, they're still in the books today. But
There you go.
I think that's just a lesson in like, maybe we don't ask enough of, do you got this?
Yeah. Yeah. I would 100% agree with that.
No. So let me ask you this: as you have, let's talk about more about prospecting for new people, and like what creates attractiveness. And I'm not talking about how pretty we are, because we already know you're tall, dark, and handsome, and that you already got that checkbox. But in terms of becoming an attractive leader or an attractive person that others want to follow, what are the elements that you see both maybe in others and that you try and exemplify yourself to create an attractive culture?
Yeah, I'm just gonna lean on a lot of the things that we've already said, because I think that is a big portion of it. Let's go back to the first thing about, like, with Meredith, what she said. It's important to figure out what you aren't, so that you can actually then step into who you actually are, or who you aren't, so you can actually step into who you are. And here's the reason why I think this is the makings of an attractive leader, is because imagine if you had a leader who is just, they're trying to be anything and everything. And although you may appreciate it, you're like, man, this guy's killing himself. Mm-hmm. Then the other side of it, you're thinking as the new person following this person is like, that's what I'm going to have to do. I'm going to have to kill myself at stuff I suck at. And the truth is, the leader doesn't need to do that. They're trying to, but they're at a point where I would also tell them is like, you need to figure out what you're not good at, and focus on what you are really good at. Because then your agents or people following you are going to be like, no, they're so good at this, and they stay in their lane. And that's attractive to them. Like, they understand that, like, oh my goodness, like I can do that with this portion of my life that I'm really good at, or with this personality of my life that I'm really good. Like, maybe they're a very nurturing person. Maybe they're a great executor, right? But then they understand, like, oh, maybe I don't have to be the person that comes up with all the ideas.
Yeah.
But when people get a business started, they feel like they've got to be that person. So another thing too is like, so that'd be the first thing, is just understanding who you aren't. The other thing is just really focus on working on yourself. If people see that you're growing all the time and working on yourself all the time, I think that's very attractive to them, even if they're brand new, right? But I can say this, sometimes it's the brand new people that are the easiest people to impress.
Yeah.
The hard people to impress, people have known you forever.
Yep.
Yep.
Because you've already set the bar.
Yeah, you've already set the bar, or they've been with you for so long. But if you work on yourself and you grow yourself, who's the first people to notice? The guy who says, man, dude, 2 years ago, you were nothing like this.
Yeah.
They can see the change visually, personality-wise, how you operate, and it's like, that makes them kind of be like, that's an attractive leader to me. Like, that person grew. This might be kind of sound dumb, but just like, also have a plan.
Yeah, fair.
Like, if you're going to lead people, have a plan, an idea, a vision. Like, if you don't plan and you don't think and you don't take that time to have like CEO time, it's like being like Mr. Magoo. I don't know if you ever saw that cartoon,
Yep.
but way back when, Mr. Magoo's just driving all around, has zero plan, doing whatever he wants. Like, could you imagine a leader who's like that, just all over the place, at being like your whole corporation, your whole agency is just going to crap.
Well, and that's what you talked about process earlier. It's
Yeah.
like you got to have that clear, defined plan and process so you know where to plug people in. And that's the other thing about like where I've seen you be able to scale so effectively without it taking more time. Because that's the thing. It's like you can always scale no matter what you do if you give more time. But how do you scale without giving it more time?
Yep.
And that's, I think, the reason where you have to have a clearly defined process that you're constantly like tinkering with.
Yep.
Because it changes. Like we've changed our process. We've all changed our process so many times. I mean, just look at how we used to, onboard and train people. It used to be
Yeah.
like, okay, here's a page and a half phone script and call me in a month and hopefully it works for you. Like that's kind of how it started. It was warm one-on-one. It was really based on like how hand to hand your immediate mentor wanted to be. And then it's really developed into like we have this tool in the system you can plug people into, and it's like there's these mentorship checkpoints where it's on the agent to reach out to us.
Yep.
And kind of say, hey, here's where I need help. So
with literally mentorship checkpoints that tell you go call your mentor at this point.
Yeah, like you got to be a little dumb to kind of like screw this up at this point. So there's two things I want to talk about as we kind of wrap up here. So the 70-30 rule, because you talked about kind of staying in your lane and doing things you're good at. So 70-30 rule meaning like spend 70% of your time doing on things that really energize you and make you feel good about, where you're headed, because things that are within your wheelhouse, you actually, by the more you do them, the more that you feel recharged. So people that are extremely extroverted like me, like I love being around other people. I love going out. I love being, able to meet new people. But for introverts, that like scares the hell out of them. And they're just like,
just feel like the battery's getting sucked.
They're getting drained. They want to, go into hiding after a little bit of that. And so you only want to spend 30% of your time, if you can, really doing those things that are not a recharge. They are a drain and they're not, they're a little bit stressful. And I think most people can just evaluate where they're at. And based on your current energy level, you're probably not at 70-30. You could be at 50-50. You could be at 30-70. And I think that's a really good kind of barometer for like how are we going to stay consistent. And then the second thing is we talk about like boundaries as a leader. You touched on that for a second. Is like you want to be, one of the ways that you stay attractive is you create a lifestyle that people want to have. And one example of this, so this last weekend I was down in Mexico and was spending time with our buddy playing in a volleyball tournament, and I found people texting me saying, hey, listen, I know you're out kind of on your vacation. I can get back to you on Monday. We don't need to do this now. And I was in this moment where I was like, I've kind of built my mentorship around being available, but I just realized like I'm draining myself being hyper available. And I should allow myself to have that recharge and that break. Time. And that's been a challenge for me. It's like, it'll be 8:30, 9 p.m. at night, and there'll be times where people will reach out to me, and I know I don't need to get back to them, but I still do it just because I feel like I'm compelled to help them. I'm compelled to help, and I never want to be the reason that anyone doesn't work out, but I think that's just such a logical fallacy of like, there's really not, at the end of the day, you can't say the wrong thing to the right person, can't say the right thing to the wrong person, they're going to figure it out. But there's key pivotal moments, I think, where you saying the right thing can really make a big difference, or you showing sympathy to someone. Empathy, all of it. And all of that. So I don't know what your thoughts are on just kind of keeping those boundaries, maybe.
No, I mean, you hit it on the nose. I'm going to go back to something we said before. It's like there's really no emergencies. There's truly not a point ever that's like people are like, oh my goodness, the world is ending. I need to get you on the phone call right now. And if that situation happens, then hey, by all means, we need to get on the phone, but express that. But the truth is, in our business, I have not seen that in any case, that there's a level of extreme situation that can't wait until the morning, or can't wait until, hey, you at least find time in your vacation to allocate for questions and things like that. Like, oh, but then you can take the time to recharge. You can go play the volleyball. You can go, maybe it's just sitting on the balcony and reading a book, right? Like, for the introverts out there, like it doesn't always have to be going out and doing something. It could be as simple as just taking some you time and finding those boundaries, setting them up, having an actual process that you follow for that, I think is the key.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome, man. Well, I think there's so much good here around not only leadership, but I think just like really everything we're talking about applies to leading ourselves too. And I think that's where it starts, and where people sometimes get a little off the rails is they don't realize that they, there's a reason you put your oxygen mask on first.
Yep.